Hey there, dear viewers. Welcome to Obsessed with Werewolves. I'm so glad you're here because I know you, like me, have a passion for all things werewolf. From their captivating tales to their mysterious nature, we're going to explore it all. So, let's dive right in and satisfy our obsession together. Opaline, my wolf gives me control after a day and a half of hiding out in the back of my own mind. She was very hesitant about seeing Lycon, and somewhat uncomfortable with Kaelin at first. I told her who he was, that he was our mate's friend, and she slowly calmed down. After they left, we looked around my room, which got demolished earlier in the day because no one would leave us alone. My wolf finally had enough of my family checking up on us and went crazy. She apologized for it in advance, but as long as my sketchbook wasn't ruined, I told her to have at it. I wasn't going to be living here anyways. The shift was rough, even more painful than usual. My wolf again apologized and said we should have switched often instead of keeping me locked up, but learned our mistakes. I only knew that I was freezing cold and exhausted, but that Lycon was waiting for me in the kitchen. I put on the shirt, which thankfully went down to my knees, and wrapped myself in my blanket, brushing off the dirt and debris. When I went to stand up, I nearly crashed back down again. So I stayed on my hands and knees and looked at the door. I didn't want to crawl, but I didn't want to ask for help either. Just call him. He won't mind helping, my wolf said gently. Taking a deep breath, I called for Lycon and waited. I saw shadows from under my door a few moments later before it opened. His gray eyes looked down at me as I felt helpless and unstable. He said, "Is the shirt on?" I nodded. "I'm just cold." My mate walked up to me and knelt beside my shaking form. "May I carry you?" I nodded again and let out a sigh of relief when I could let my body rest against him. My eyes fluttered shut and I breathed deeply as he walked out of my room and down the hall. When we made it to the kitchen, he continued to hold me while he got a plate piled with turkey and salad, then a fork, then went to sit at a table nearby. "Can you sit up on your own?" I shrugged, pulling the blanket closer to my body as he knelt again and placed me on a chair. When I glanced behind him, Kaelin was watching me with a calculating expression. I couldn't help but bring my knees to my chest and hug them tight, making sure the blanket covered everything. Lycon moved the plate in front of me and made me look up at him. "Eat go slow, but eat. Take as much time as you need. I'm not hungry." I lied because I couldn't eat that whole plate. "You've lost weight. Opaline, your father told me you weren't eating as much as you usually do. We won't go anywhere until that's gone." I shut my mouth and nodded solemnly. He walked away towards Kale and disappeared into the kitchen. I spent the next few minutes taking small bites and shivering from the cold air. My eyes wandered around, finding the room was empty except for me. My wolf encouraged me to eat at least half the plate so I'd feel better. Half an hour later, I couldn't eat any more and Lycon returned. He stared at the plate, judging how much I ate before seeming somewhat satisfied. He then pulled out a chair and faced me. "Are you serious? What happened?" he asked after a moment. I saw Kaelin out the corner of my eye and turned my attention to him. "Can we be alone?" He nodded and left, shutting the door behind him. I turned to my mate and saw patience and concern in his expression, but also exhaustion. I got scared. Of what? Swallowing the lump in my throat. I told him. He listened attentively, and then held me when I started to cry at the end, sliding me off my chair and into his lap. After a minute, I whispered, "I wanted to call you, but I'm not like other wolves." "What do you mean?" "I can't mind link. I can't use my mind to talk to anyone except my wolf. It's frustrating and no one could understand me. I couldn't shift for them. I didn't want anyone else. I didn't feel safe anymore. I'm here now. Opal, you're coming home with me. I've made precautions and thought it was time." I furrowed my brows. "Precautions?" He smiles. "I'm alpha now." My eyes widen and I look over him a little. He doesn't look different, but he does have a powerful aura about him that makes me more drawn to him than last time. "Does that mean I'm Luna?" "Yes and no." He sets me back on my chair and holds my hands, looking deep into my eyes. "You are Luna because you're my mate. but not officially. Lunas must have a ceremony of their own. Then we must complete the mating bond. When you've completed the ceremony, then you will officially be declared Luna of Blue Oasis. You had a ceremony too. It's just like the Luna ceremony. Just for an alpha. All the same steps apply. The only difference is that you'll be dressed more with modest than I was. He smiles and I try to think of what he meant when he said, I only wore pants. More for your benefit than mine. Why for me? Because you're my mate. I didn't want other females all over me and you getting jealous. I didn't want you to feel like I didn't care about your opinion. My heart lifted before I remembered what I'd done before try and almost got attacked. I smiled like Koan and almost had the urge to jump up and down with satisfaction. I helped. I said with more enthusiasm than I had all night. I helped a lot of people and they kept coming back for more. He smiles, his gray eyes brightening with happiness. I'm glad. I'm proud of you. I can tell it made you happy to help them, and that's a great thing. I squeeze his hands and lean forward a little. I loved it. Especially helping out with the children. Do you like children? Opal? He asked with a tilt of his head. I nod emphatically. I never really dreamed about having children before. But after you left and it became my routine. I really want children. I want a few and be able to play with them. I want a little of my own. Like Hon. His smile broadens as he looks over towards the kitchen. I see Kale walking over as he asks. I hope I'm not intruding. Lycon shakes his head and looks back to me. When I turn to him as well, he says, You need to get some rest before we leave. And are you not sleeping in your room? My smile falters and I look away shamefully. I didn't mean to. But I needed to do something or else someone was going to get hurt. My mate makes me look up at him and I see he's not mad. It's fine. We'll use the guest room. Your brother and his mate prepared it for us. What about Kale in? Lycon raised his brows. Is he not allowed to stay with us for one night? I shrugged and looked at the man. I don't know. It seems weird. Don't you think? Both men laughed and Lycon stood up. Stretching. He will be fine. Besides, I have a feeling you'll be asleep before either of us. So it won't matter. I smile and agreed inwardly. Can you stand and walk now? I don't think so. I admit. Lycon shrugs and bends down to wrap his arms around my back and under my legs. I hold the blanket tight as he straightens and starts walking out of the dining room. Kale and right behind us. When we get to the bedroom, my mate kicks the door open gently and walks in. I noticed 2 beds on either side of the room and extra blankets piled on the dresser. Not 2. Kale walks up beside us and crosses his arms. Well, hell, this is going to be a tight fit. Especially for you two. Lycon puts me down on one of the beds and looks around. Finally, he kneels and says, I'm going to shift and sleep at the end of your bed. It'll be better than trying to stay on while sleeping beside you. I look from him to the end of the bed and ask, Aren't you a little big to sleep on the bed? He gives me a small grin. Don't worry. Opaline, it'll fit and keep your feet warm. I smile and yawn. He takes that chance to shift me so I'm laying down with blankets covering me. He disappears into the adjoining bathroom and shifts, then hops onto the bed, laying down with his eyes on me. I sit up and reach over to scratch his head, then kiss the top of it. Good night. Lycon. I whisper and lie back down, closing my eyes and falling asleep shortly. Lycon Kale and wakes me up and immediately. My eyes go in search of my mate. They catch her on her stomach, sound asleep. Her hair is spread about her shoulders and back. I relax and look to my friend who says her father is wanting to see me. I go shift and dress in the pants I borrowed last night, then walked with him to Alpha Merle's office. When we got there, I told him to go keep an eye on Opaline in case she wakes. Call me if she does. He departs back the way we came and I entered the office. Merle was sitting at his desk with a lazy posture and watchful eyes. I greeted him and sat down in the chair opposite him, waiting for him to tell me why I'm here. How is Opaline? He asks first. Asleep. She shifted last night when I got here. Ate, and went to bed. Did she tell you what the reason was for her behavior? I nod. Rogues. And memories. Merle nodded. closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Are you taking her with you today? That is the plan. Unless there is a reason I should not. The alpha shakes his head and sighs. I was not sure if she was stable enough for such a journey. I am concerned for her. We'll take as many stops as she needs. Kaylin, I will guard her well until we're safe inside my house, where people can keep an eye on her when I'm not around. He nods and gives me a small smile. My blessings on your future. Elfalegon. Make my daughter happy. I nod and exit his office with a satisfied grin. Kaylin hasn't contacted me about Opaline, so I go to the kitchen and find cereal, pouring it in a bowl along with milk. Then take it up to the room. I knock and Kaylin opens it, closing it behind me. My maid is still asleep in the same position, so I set the food down on the dresser and turn to my friend. Well, give her another hour to sleep, then make her get up. I want to be gone by noon. He nods and lays down on his bed while I go over and sit beside Opaline, brushing her hair behind her ears. A male is coming. Ichia's not part of this pack either. My wolf informs me. I tense and look at Kaylin. Someone from another pack is here. He bolts upright at the door, making sure to close it softly. Can you tell if Ichia's friend or foe? My wolf doesn't reply for a moment. Friend of the family, but too close to mate. Ichia's looking for her. I narrow my eyes at Opaline but tell Kaylin to call off the search. I wanted to see this male and who he is. Kaylin walks back in after a minute or two. Then there is a knock 5 minutes later and I walk over to open the door. The male looks up at me then past me to Opaline. I'm sorry. Alpha. I didn't know she was still asleep. Who are you? I ask with mock curiosity. He hesitates. Loop. Invaded to a pack far south of here. I got here a week or so ago and was checking in with Opaline. We've been friends for a while and his voice trails off when he notices Kaylin. Swallowing hard, he steps back and bows his head. I just was wondering if she was all right now. She's fine. I hiss. Loop nods and starts walking away. I close the door and turn to my friend. Knowing she's hesitant seeing men and Reston being squeamish herself, I am letting him off the hook. Kaylin nods and glances at his Luna. Maybe you should start the bond before we leave. He looks at me and shrugs. It'll keep others away and maybe keep her safer while traveling. I shake my head and walk over to sit beside her again. It won't do much good. She can't even contact her own pack with her mind, much less someone from another pack. I am not sure if the bond will do much. She's got to have some protection though. And she will. But starting the bond only to not have her be able to call for help isn't going to help. Kaylin thinks for a moment, his eyes glancing from me to Opaline. If I didn't know Kaylin, I'd have thought he was checking her out. But it's not in his best interest. He wants his own mate. And we'll get her. Ichia's been with a select few girls from school, but no more than 10. Ichia's scared though she may not exist. I sigh and look at my mate again to see her eyes flutter open to look at me. Confusion then delight blooms on her face as she looks me up and down. Her celeste eyes hover over my stomach, widening slightly before coming back to rest on my face. Are we leaving today? She asks softly. I nod, entranced by her melodious voice. You don't have to shower unless you absolutely feel like it. But you must eat and walk around a little. Get some strength back into your limbs. Kaylin and I can step out while you get ready. But we need to leave soon. She nods in understanding and sits up. Reaching up, she pushes a stray lock of my hair off my face and behind my ear. You need a haircut. She's right. Kaylin says with a smile. I roll my eyes at him and shake my head, making it stand at odd ends. Opaline gives a small giggle before trying the same. Her hair doesn't do much, but it needs a good brushing. When she looks up at me, I smile and watch as she moves closer to me. She embraces me with her head on my shoulder and sighs. I'm happy to go with you. I wrap my arms around her and rub her back. I look to Kaylin and say, can you go see if there is a pair of pants she can wear? She's not wearing a shirt around the house. He leaves with a small smirk while Opaline pulls back and finds a brush. As she does her hair, I bring the bowl of cereal over and set it in her lap. Her eyes light up once again and begins to eat when her hair lies flat down her back. I am delightfully relieved when she begins to wolf down the whole dish, no pun intended. She looks up at me with a small smile. Can I have more? Definitely. I laugh and tell her to relax while I go get it. When I return, Kale-in is outside the door, leaning against the wall with his eyes closed. He looks at me when he senses him nearing and smirks again. No men allowed. Not even those with food. I raise my brows. And why is that? My Luna is dressing and demanded I keep all visitors out until she claims she is ready. He gives a short laugh and crosses his arms. I barely got into the room when she ripped the pants out of my hands and told me to get out. I stared dumbfounded at my friend and his claims about my mate. A moment later, the door opens and Opaline appears in a large shirt and pink sweats. They seem a little small for her, but she won't be wearing them for too long. Plus I have clothes for her at my house, so she'll be fine. She sees me and the food before looking to Kale-in with an innocent smile. Thank you, Kale-in. No problem, Luna. Opaline turns to me and takes the bowl, eating a few bites before she smiles at me. I just need my sketchbook. I know where it's at if I can just go get it real fast. I nod and step aside to let her go. Just be back in 10. Okay? She grins and finishes her cereal, handing the bowl to me, before darting down the hall. I stare after her and laugh. That is definitely our Luna. Kale-in nods. Now I'll just have to see how she does with the long journey. Before long, Kale-in, Opaline, and I are ready to go and are outside by the stalls. Opaline had finally talked to her family about the reason for her isolation and attitude the past couple of days, and requested our sketchbook be sent to my house immediately since we held and carry it without it getting ruined. Kale-in I went in separate stalls first, and came out in our wolf form. Opaline stared at me with honor eyes. I walked up to her and pressed my head to her thigh, rubbing my scent against her. She drops and hugs me, running her fingers through my thick, black fur. I sat and let her explore a little, her hands gentle and curious. Behind me, Kale-in snorted annoyingly and pushed me away from my mate so she could focus. I glared at him, only to see H.E.S. giving me a wolfish grin. When Opaline came out, her wolf came up to me and stood on her back feet, putting her forepaws on my chest and she held and reached my shoulders. Her ears were up and her amber eyes seemed to dance with light. Something told me she wanted to play, so I licked her muzzle, which earned me a low growl in return. I nipped at her ears, and she jumped away a few feet and stood, lowering her front as if she were ready to lunge. Her tail was in the air, wagging slightly while her eyes stayed fixed on me. Kale-in brought me back to reality when he gave a short bark in warning. Opaline's happiness faded a little, but she got serious enough to walk forward and sit in front of me, bowing her head a little. I blinked and realized she was showing respect towards me. As her alpha, I needed to tell her to stop, but Kel didn't say anything to her, so gave a yip and led the way out of Whisper Eclipse territory. Opaline only glanced back once, before she bounded along with us, acting like a pup and playing between our legs. Maybe you should carry her, Kale-in suggested after about an hour. I snorted. I already know she won't let me. Besides, why do that when it's entertaining to see her so happy? At least she isn't running away from us or cowering in terror. Kale-in says with a glance at my mate, who was underneath me, running without getting trampled on. We'll stop in a couple of hours to let her rest. She's still weak and I don't want her to pass out on us at any point in time. Kale-in nods and we continue running, Opaline never falling back once. Opaline, it took until late night to get to Blue Oasis back because Lygon wanted me to eat every few hours, catching a squirrel or some rabbit. I hadn't minded. Still don't. My mate was large enough that I could travel beneath him without any troubles at all, and only came out of there when I saw something interesting or wanted to feel the sun on my fur. He didn't seem to mind though, so I did what I wanted. When we arrived finally, I had to stop near a crick and drink. Exhausted and achy, Kale-in watched over me while Lygon went on a final hunt for me. I was growing used to having Kale-in around, and even started liking his personality. I was comfortable, but I still was tense until Lygon returned. He was the only one I trusted in such a foreign place. He was the only one I knew would help me if I needed it. It seems he trusted Kaelin with me, so I didn't protest. Something about Kaelin made me think he is usually gentle around women and children. After Lycon got back and all three of us ate a small meal, he led us to where his house was located. I didn't seem to notice much except for a building that was a bit larger than any other. I paused to stare at it, wondering what it was since my pack didn't have one. Kaelin nudged me forward, making me take my eyes off it to follow Lycon. We approached his large house and the two men immediately shifted, throwing pants on that were in a basket by the door. I watched as Lycon brought me a night gun and knelt. Kaelin went inside into bed. "Can you shift now?" I whimpered, but my wolf said to me, "We're too tired to go much further. Just let him help us. I don't like others seeing me naked. It won't be for long. Just until he puts that on you." My thoughts swirled around and I couldn't help but look around in case anyone else was watching. Lycon caught on to what I was doing and said, "You're safe, Opaline. My pack respects their Luna. Besides, everyone who isn't on patrol is asleep. Even my parents." I looked up at him with my tail between my legs, but moved so my body rested against his warm one. He wrapped his arms around me, and I began to shift. Lycon opened the gown so it was covering me until I was finished shifting. Then he handed it to me and looked away. I quickly put it on, then looked around again. What was that big building in the middle of all the smaller ones? He made me look at him before speaking. "It's where we hold pack meetings. Everyone can gather in one place and talk about needs and wants. If there is a trial to be held, we hold it there. Does that make sense?" I nodded and wrapped my arms around his neck. "Where am I sleeping?" I feel his chest rumble with laughter as he picks me up. He walks into his dark house and up some stairs before coming to a door down one hallway. Taking one hand, he turns the knob and opens it, then crosses the threshold. My eyes wander from the huge bed to the large windows to a set of doors to his desk. Lycon lets me observe his huge room. Above is what looks like a chandelier at first, but turns out to be a light fixture made of antlers and horns. The windows are actually sliding glass doors onto a large balcony that overlooks a piece of his territory. His walls are a mutual color of a soft beige while his bedding was a black and gray pattern. The rest of his furniture, including his doors, were mahogany. "It's so big," I whisper. I point to the double doors. "What is that?" He walks over and opens it, revealing a closet filled with clothes. What surprised me was only half of it was his clothes while the other half were mine, though it didn't feel as much as his did. I looked up at him in confusion, to which he explained, "Your belongings have been arriving and my mother and a few other females have been putting them away. So you didn't see my underwear?" I ask accusingly. Lycon laughs again and walks out of the closet to another door, revealing a bathroom now. If it weren't for being busy, I might have looked. But right now, you need to worry about getting cleaned up. He sets me down on the toilet and turns to the shower, turning on the spray. When he comes back, he kneels and asks, "Can you do it without falling asleep?" I smile and nod. I don't take long showers. He nods and stands. "Okay. Why don't you get in and get started? I will bring you a towel and put it on the counter. When you're finished, there is your essential needs in the cabinets above the sink. I will be in the bedroom if you need anything." "Okay. Why are you working?" I ask hesitantly. "If I don't, the pack becomes disorganized." He bends down and kisses my head. "Clean up. Opal, don't worry about me. Just think about you. I'll go to bed when I know you're sound asleep and comfortable." With that, he leaves the bathroom. I shower and get ready for bed, putting on the shirt I had on previously. It takes me 10 minutes altogether, and I finally step out into the bedroom where there is a little light coming from his desk where he sits and is writing. I watch him for a moment, wondering how he can work when we've been traveling all day. No answers come and I walk over to the bed, exhaustion gnawing at my brain. I feel, rather than anything else, Lycon come up behind me and help me pull the covers away. His footsteps are steady and even, casual and slow, but careful to he doesn't want to scare me. When he reaches around me for the sheets, I still and watch until there's enough space for me to crawl in and curl up. My mate covers me, then sits beside me, brushing my wet hair out of my eyes. I say, Are you going to shift again and sleep near my feet? He smiles and shakes his head no. I'm going to sleep beside you this time in human form. We're silent a moment as we stare into each other's eyes. Then he says, tomorrow, you're going to meet the pack. I think it'll be good for them to see you before your ceremony so they can get to know you. After that, I'm going to have Kale and walk you around and guard you. Where will you be? I ask, talking with my patrol and getting them to change shifts as well as men. It's going to be a while before everything is set in place and Kale already knows the plan. So he doesn't need to be there. You have free reign over where you want to go. But be careful. Stay where others can see you and don't fight Kale in if he thinks you should be inside. If something happens that you feel unsafe or uncomfortable with, tell him. If you need me, you'll have him find me. There should be no reason for you and your wolf getting out of control, so long as you communicate with us. When will the ceremony be? When you're ready. He says, now sleep. They'll be coming to bed soon, but don't wait up for me. I reach up and grab his hand, holding it tightly. Do you think they'll accept me? Your pack. They don't have a choice in the matter. Lycon says as he bends down and kisses my head again. You're either Luna. They need to accept you. My other hand presses against his chest to where his heart is, and reality crashes upon me. Lycon, I'm scared. I don't know anyone. My family is far away. I feel overwhelmed. Hey, he says, getting closer. He cups my face and makes me only focus on him. You're okay. I know this is new for you, but everything will be all right. Tail in, I will help you out. We can go visit your family soon and you will get to know everyone soon. You don't need to be scared of my pack. Obeline, they're all good people and very helpful. You'll be accepted and loved soon enough. His gray eyes are sincere and attentive, his hands caressing my face gently while he sits beside me on the bed. I sit up and hug him, believing him because I can feel his words are from his heart. How long will you be tomorrow? I ask softly. He pulls back and thinks for a minute. All morning and most of the afternoon. I won't be here when you wake, so you'll be alone. Kaelin will come find you to take you around the territory early afternoon. Until then, you can do whatever inside. Will I be able to run with my wolf? With Kaelin? Or you can wait until I get home. He says and lies me back again. Sleep, Opal. You have a long day ahead of you. I obey. When I wake the next morning, Lycon had been true to his words. There was no sight of him. I wanted to stay in bed for a while more, but I was actually looking forward to spending the day with Kaelin. I went to the closet and brought out some jeans and a plain purple t-shirt. Going to the bathroom, I did all my other personal needs, then headed out into the hall. My eyes looked about as I walked towards the stairs. There were 2 other doors in this hallway, but I decided not to look in them. When I was on the first floor, I saw a large living room with a few couches and a fireplace. On one wall were floor 2 ceiling windows looking out over the territory. I headed into the kitchen and rummaged through the fridge, then the cabinets. It took a while, but soon I was cooking bacon and eggs with a side of toast. Lycon had a lovely kitchen with all modern appliances and granite countertops. His cabinets were stained wooden brass knobs. It seemed he also has state-of-the-art cookware too. When my breakfast was finished, I went to the dining room and sat down at the somewhat small table. It was circular with only 4 chairs, but in the middle were some napkins, salt, and pepper. It was very cozy and I ate my food, then cleaned up my mess in the kitchen. It seemed he also had a dishwasher, but I couldn't find the soap to put in there, so washed all dishes by hand. It was gruesome, but I managed well enough. I was heading back up to my room when I saw Kaelin walking into the kitchen smiling. He was wearing jeans as well and a black t-shirt with boots. Hello, Luna. I leaned against the fridge and eyed him curiously. He went over to the counter, plucked an apple from a bowl, and bit into it before turning to me. I waited for him to stop chewing before saying, there are leftover bacon if you would like. He raises his brows. Since when does Lycon cook bacon? He doesn't like it. Oh no, he loves bacon, but won't ever cook it. Can he cook? Kaelin thought for a moment then shrugged. Sometimes, Usually if he is having people over, but he hates cooking bacon with all the grease. I smiled, then took the Ziploc containing the meat out of the fridge and handed it to him. I made it this morning. Kaylin took a piece out, then handed it back to me. It's fine. I don't want to take like Han's bacon. I'd she'd be pissed. I frown, but turn away, put the bacon back, then go up to brush my teeth. When I went back down, Kaylin was looking out the windows in the living room, deep in thought. I wondered what it was he was thinking, or if he wanted to just skip today since he looked really tense. I must have made a sound because he turned to me with a smile. I hugged myself and looked up at him. So, like An said, you'd give me a tour. That he did. The beta said and quickly walked around the couches to stand in front of me. It's your choice. Would you like to see children or training first? Training. I say and follow him out the front door, which was past the dining room through a little hallway. Kaylin walked a step in front of me and to the right. His hands were in his pockets casually while his eyes scanned the area around us. All around us. Other people were staring at us or me, not trying to hide it. Some people waved and smiled. Some just stood there shocked. Others, my confidence wavered and I got somewhat closer to Kaylin. When we stopped at a gymnasium, he turned to me. There is the inside training area for stuff like treadmill. Then the outside where we spar. I can show you both or just the outside. I shrugged. Let's just see the outside. He nodded, then turned to the left, walking down to the end of the building before turning the corner. What I saw made me halt and stare. Men were fighting with women. Women were holding their own against men. They all were enjoying themselves no matter how sweaty and bruised they got. One woman flipped a guy over her shoulder, then straddled him. Blonde hair tied back except for the few strands that managed to escape. Another woman seemed about my height and managed to kick a man to his knees who was 3 times her size. Kaylin turned to me and grinned. Cool, huh? I nodded and continued to watch only to see Kaylin say, Would you like me to introduce you to one of my friends? His name is Kurt. He makes sure everyone here builds the necessary strength they need to help in battle. He whistled and a man from somewhere on the far side of the training field started running towards us. Kaylin said, Ichia's going to like you, why? He always took an instant liking to women who have a fire in their eyes. Kurt slowed and stopped beside Kaylin, who introduced him. Kurt, this is our Luna, Opaline from the Whisper Eclipse Pack. She is excited to start our training here. Kurt smiled at me. Big and seemed taller than like On. Hello, Luna. How are you liking our pack? Something in me liked him and didn't fear him like I thought I would. I shrugged, crossing my arms. From what I've seen, it's good. He turned to Kaylin. So Alpha and you managed to get her here without problems. It was too bad. Took all day and half the night to get home though. What exactly happened? You will have to talk to the Alpha about that. I'm not about to talk to anyone about what happened when it's between him and the Luna. Kurt nodded and turned to me again. We'll see each other soon. Luna, I must excuse myself to spar with someone for a while. I nodded and he ran off. Kaylin didn't seem happy and was staring off into space. His eyes were focused, yet unfocused. It occurred to me he was using the mind link and I looked away before he realized I was staring. Behind me were little houses and different people coming out of them. To the training field's left was the large building where, like On said, the pack meetings were held. It was there I wanted to go, to see what it looked like on the inside. Kaylin was still staring at nothing and talking to whomever through the mind link, so I walked off towards my destination. I'd passed children and adults, all doing whatever they wanted. Some children circled me, as if I was a part of their games before running off towards others. I smiled and finally made it to the building. Above the doors leading inside, there were large letters that spelled Pack House. Intrigued, I went inside. First thing I noticed was that it was nothing more than another home. A living room much larger than my Khan's. A game room where there were video games and card games all neatly organized on a shelf. There was a kitchen, bedrooms, a library, storage area, 15 bathrooms, and in the basement was an auditorium that could sit a small crowd with a stage in the front. This must be where they hold the meetings, I thought. What I had noticed was there weren't any windows and the space seemed dark no matter if I switched the lights on or not. But another thing was that this building was well cared for, well used, well loved. I went back outside and looked around. Kale-in had disappeared from his spot, probably either looking for me or off to some business. I didn't mind much. I could find my way around easily, not wanting to go back to Lycon's house. I took a stroll looking around at everyone and eventually found myself at a little park where the children were playing. I caught the eye of one small girl whose eyes brightened and said something to the others before running towards me. I was slightly curious, as well as cautious of the female adults, but none of them seemed to mind that the children were running up to a stranger who wasn't officially part of their pack. Luna. The girl launched herself into my arms, barely giving me enough time to catch her before she wrapped her arms around my neck and embraced me. The others were around my legs, hugging me however they found possible. Suddenly, they all moved away and a woman stepped forward with a smile on her face. I'm sorry. Children have been excited about the alpha and his mate, and wanted to meet her. It's all right. No harm. They're sweet and cute. And I love children. The woman took the girl and shooed her off to play before extending a hand to me. My name is Nadine. I think you'll find this place very welcoming. I shook her hand. Opaline, nice to meet you. Nadine smiled again and walked me over to a bench. She watched the children for a while before turning to me. So, what pack are you from? Whisper Eclipse. She seemed surprised by this and asked, Are you the Alpha's daughter? I nodded slowly, but she smiled and took my hand. I can already tell you'll make a wonderful Luna. Opaline, Lycon will take good care of you. If you do like, I can introduce you to people. I smiled and was going to say something when she turned her head. I looked and saw Kale-in running towards us, saying to Nadine, Thank the goddess it was you who found her. I thought she might run into J.E. Nadine laughed and shook her head. No, Beta. She wandered here and immediately got swarmed by the children. Kale-in stopped before us and smiled. Better children than someone else. He turned to me. I'm sorry. Opaline, I didn't mean to ignore you. It's okay, I said softly. Where did you go? He asked and crossed his arms. The pack house. I was in there before wandering here and meeting Nadine. He nods and looks at the woman beside me. How are you? By the way, I turned to Nadine with concern, somewhat surprised that I reacted this way but paid attention. I'm fine. I just wish it was him. What happened? I asked, confused beyond belief. Kale-in got my attention and said, She found her mate the other night. I sat still, knowing there was bad news to go along with this. He is the leader of the rogues that keep attacking. Lycon. My conversation with Kale-in this morning was very enlightening. It seemed Kurt wanted to know more than needed and had wanted to know what had happened with Opaline at our pack. After Kale-in made this speech about not divulging anything without permission, Kurt went back to sparring, his wolf showing in his eyes with an emotion Kale-in cowled and red. I told Kale-in to stay near Opaline until they got back to the house, and he promised he would. After that, he asked how last night went, and I told him it went as well as it could go when one just left their family and was put into a position like she was. Now, late afternoon and finished with assigning the guards their new stations and shift for patrol, I walked out of the little house that holds these meetings and breathed in the fresh air. I asked Kale-in where he and Opaline were now, and he said still at the children's park. Furrowing my brows, I asked him how long they've been there and why. She met Nadine earlier after seeing the sparring fields and took a liking to her. She's been between talking with her and playing with the children who can't seem to get enough of her. He chuckles slightly. All the kids want her attention, and she can't seem to catch up, but doesn't seem frustrated, only excited. My wolf howled in delight. She loves pups. She definitely does if she can handle so many at once. I say without a him. To Kale-in I said I'll be right over. I started walking and J.E. walked up to me with long lashes and a frown on her lips. What's wrong? J.E. You didn't go to training today. I had work. I'm an alpha. I can't just train all day. I tried to start walking again towards the park, but J.E. stopped me. I looked down at her and frowned in irritation. She said, But I saw Beta Kale-in there. Usually you two are inseparable. She had a point. We were inseparable. but I sighed and held her at arm's length. He was doing what I asked him to, and I have to take care of the pack now. I can't do fun games all day anymore. Plus, I have a. But you promised you'd be there today. I furrowed my brows even more. When? She smiled. The day of your alpha ceremony. I thought back, but don't remember this. So, instead of saying anything to her, I started taking long strides towards the one place I wanted to be near my mate. Jene followed and asked where I was going and if I could slow down. But I didn't listen. When I finally got to the park, I found Opaline helping a child on the monkey bars, smiling at him and giving soft encouragements. Her raven hair flew out behind her as the wind picked up, but she didn't seem to notice. Nadine and Kaelin were talking on a bench, also watching their Luna and the children play. When the boy made it to the end, she set him down and ran around, tickling random children and embracing others. Chess magnificent. Who is that? Jene asked, not bothering to hide her attitude. My wolf growled at her, but I wasn't paying attention. Your Luna. Jene seemed shocked by this because she turned to me and made me look down at her. Your mate. I thought she was still back in her pack because it's dangerous. I brought her here for other reasons besides danger. She's not like other she-wolves and I needed to help her. The only way to do that was to bring her here. Jene pouted, which made me shrug. When I went to go talk to Kaelin, Jene grabbed my arm, making me look back at her. Does that mean we're off? We weren't on. How could we be off if we were never on? Her eyes filled with hurt. So you love her. You love her after a couple of days knowing her. You've known me longer and seemed to like me for a while. Jene. I've only had one other girlfriend, and I've known her all my life. I've only known you for a couple of months. You are the one who assumed we were dating. I was only trying to help you get stronger. Nothing more. We haven't even kissed. The woman glanced at Opaline before focusing back on me. Fine, she said and stomped off, sighing in relief that argument was over. I strode over to the bench and leaned against the back of it. Anything I missed? I asked Nadine and Kaelin. They both looked at me with smiles. Only Klyns faltered when he saw my strained look. Nadine said, Nope. Your mate is great with children, though. What's wrong? Kaelin asked. I sent Jene home in tears. How apparently, she thought we were dating. Kaelin laughed and Nadine was shocked before shaking her head in mock annoyance. She asked, If you don't mind Alpha, I can bring her home later if you have work to do. I shook my head. That's all right. Thank you for the offer. That's Spidey. My fated mate. Lights flashed around me and my world spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. I couldn't stop looking at Opaline as she continued her games with the children, as if just noticing my presence. Her head popped up and spotted me. She froze in the middle of the whirlwind of children, just gazing at me like she was trying to memorize every inch of my figure. Not that I could blame her, for I was doing the same. A smile broke upon Opaline's lips and she bent down to a girl and said something. The girl turned and looked at me before smiling at my mate and running off. The other children followed the girl while Opaline started walking towards us, still gazing at me in awe. Earth to Lygon. Kaelin half shouted. I looked at him, finally breaking my gaze on my mate. What is it? You were staring off into space. I thought you might have fainted or something. I shook my head and stood straight while Opaline walked over to me and wrapped her arms around me middle, head resting right below my chest. Kissing her head, hug her tight and give her a little squeeze to make her look up at me. Ready to go home? No, she whispered and glanced at the children. I want to stay outside and feel free because I like it. I like running around while the wind whips my hair back. She paused and blushed a little. But I am hungry. Nadine's eyes brightened. Alpha, would mind bringing your Luna out to a bar tonight? I looked down at my mate. How old are you? 19. It'll be 20 soon, she said and tilted her head to the side a little in curiosity. How old are you? 25. I turned to Nadine. Well, though, but let me help her get changed first. Opaline asked while Nadine took off to get ready. Where are we going? I smiled down at her and loved the way she was so innocent. A place where it seems like people lose their money often. How was that good? She asked with narrowed eyes that seemed to be trying to read my mind. You can get drinks and food, and dance all night long and no one will judge you. I looked to Kale and who seemed to be in deep thought. Come on, best friend. Let's get drunk. He turned and gave me a wicked grin. Oh no. Like on. You are not really going to help your mate get drunk, are you? Of course not. I say with a hand on my heart while Opaline pulled away to say parting words with the children. She's not going to even be near drunk. I won't let her do that unless we're home and when I've figured out how much she can handle. Besides, I have a feeling we would have a hard time catching her if she did get drunk. Kale laughed and left, saying he'll meet us at my house in a half hour. I let Opaline finish her goodbyes before taking her hand and leading her home. She said, I hope you don't plan on putting me in a dress. I looked at her, then ran my eyes down her frame. Not if you don't want, but I do expect you to change. She smiled and let go of my hand to run ahead. My house in view. Without stopping, she ran inside, leaving the door wide open for me. Once I stepped inside, I heard her shuffling around upstairs before a door closes. I smile at how excited she is, and sit on the couch to wait. It was only 5 minutes later when I looked up from a book to see her walking down the stairs, shoulders back and hair tied up in a messy bun. She changed into a tight pair of leather pants, a loose shirt that stopped just above her belly button, black boots that ended mid-calf, and a necklace with a pendant resting on her collarbone. She was stunning to say the least, and her blush to her face only added to that. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and shyly said, I hope this is okay. I blinked a few times and stood up, going over and resting my hands on her hips, my index finger grazing her skin lightly as I looked down at her. Do you have a jacket? It might get cold. I don't want to lose it. She whispered and looked at what I had on. Since I hadn't changed, I was still wearing jeans and a gray shirt, and I don't want to wear it while dancing. No one will steal from you, I say softly. They know better than to piss me off. Opaline smiled and seemed to get distracted by running her fingers over my stubble. Can Nadine spend time with me? I mean, can I trust her when you and Kaelin aren't around? Nadine would be a great person for you to hang out with. She can help you settle in and get accustomed here. Her smile widened. Can she fight? Yes, but she hasn't trained for a while now. Opaline went silent, thinking and stroking my chin softly. She will be my beta. If you trust her and Kaelin trust her, then I trust her. She was really nice to me today and offered to keep me company. I like her a lot. I smiled. I'm glad. She seems to like you a lot as well. Opaline embraced me and Kael's words about marking her came back to me. Taking a deep breath, I pulled her to the couch and sat down with her, making her look at me. Opaline, do you know about the mating bond? She nods. Do you know that in order for that bond to grow properly, we need to do certain things? My mother explained it when I was 13, but I'm not sure I understand it. Well, first we meet. Both wolves become aware of who their mate is and are instantly attached. With consent, the male will mark the female, telling any other male who is her heart and soul. Once he is finished, the female will decide if she wants to mark him or not. What happens if she doesn't? The female won't feel the bond as much as the male, so it will mostly be one-sided. I say and watch as Opaline took this in before I continue. Once this is done, they are able to sense each other, talk to each other through the link, and get closer to each other. I can't use the link, she said, her body slumping a little. Kaelin seems to think that if we mark each other, then your link will open up. He said maybe you're E-blocked somehow, so maybe if we try the bond, it'll open up. Opaline thought about this and shrugged, but a spark of hope lit in her eyes. Her tone was serious when she asked, what if it doesn't? I sighed. I'm not sure yet, but I want to ask you to be willing to try. You to be able to at least hear me in your head while in human form. My mate smiled at the thought and only hesitated a moment longer before nodding. I want to try. I want to hear your voice in my human form. Opaline embraced me once he heard I'd try. The delight in his eyes was pure gold and it warmed my heart that I made him feel this way. When I went to pull away, he only held me tighter, so I relaxed a bit and let his warmth soothe me. He started kissing my neck and ear, his hands still on my waist, fingers stroking a little before they came up and rubbed my shoulders. I pulled back and stared at my mate to see he was smiling. When he finally noticed me, he said, "It's going to hurt for a moment. Then, another feeling should come to you. One that will be good." I nodded, then let him kiss me some more before I felt his sharp canines against my neck between that and my shoulder. I tensed instantly, but didn't pull away. Lycon kissed one more time before biting into me. My voice came out in a whimper, I think, because he held me tighter as I felt some part of me go to him, some part of me connect with him. Then, I felt what I could only describe as pleasure. Pure, hot pleasure. After a long moment, he pulled back and kissed me again before saying, "You okay?" I smiled as to not show my pain and tilted my head at him. "Can I do it to you?" "Of course. You can," he says with bright gray eyes. I leaned forward and looked at his neck, but unsure of what to do. "Let your wolf guide you?" Like Han says when I pulled back to stare at him. "Start kissing him like he did you." My wolf instructs. "Where?" "Start on the lips and work your way to one side of his neck until you find the perfect spot." "How do I know?" "You'll know." I start kissing like on the lips softly, getting used to the feel before I go down to his jaw. He puts his head back to give me access to his neck. I put my hands on his shoulders and hold on while I make it to the left side of his neck. Flick your tongue out and taste his skin. It'll help find the connection. I flick my tongue and taste his sweet skin. Relaxing a little, I feel his hands rub my back gently, comforting and encouraging. My lips find the part between his shoulder and neck and immediately felt the need to bite. I can't hold back. Somehow I'll hear his quaid. My wolf comes to the forefront of my mind and her canines grow where mine should be. I almost pull back, but she has part control and keeps my body there. "It's all right. You need these canines because yours are dull as leaves." I relax and kiss and lick his skin once more before my wolf says it's time and we bite into his skin delicately. Blood flows into my mouth in a steady trickle as well as a part of him. I suck in a breath and close my eyes, letting it fill me up. The sensation was like having an extra spark of adrenaline during a fight, getting you the boost you need to survive. Only this time it'd stay with me forever. Pull back, licking his blood away from his skin. I pulled back, my wolf retracting her canines and retreating to the back of my mind again. With one last lick, I sat back and continued to feel the bond that I knew was connecting me to Lycon. Hands encased my face and I'd opened my eyes to look up at my mate. He was smiling with adoration and happiness, melting my heart. I felt my heart beat erratically just at the sight of him. I saw him in a new perspective and couldn't stop staring at him. It seemed the sunset was making him glow, like it was meant for him. He's even more handsome than I remembered. He is, isn't he? "Opaline," he said and I smiled. Lycon leaned forward and kissed me softly. "You look like you're about to pass out from laughing gas." I giggle and wrap my arms around his neck. "This is just different. That's all." He chuckled and pulled back, staring intently at me. "Close your eyes and relax your mind," he says and I obey. A few seconds pass and I can't handle it anymore. Opening one eye, I peek at him and see he's getting frustrated. Brows furrowed, eyes closed. I realize what he's trying to do and reach out to him. "You look like you need the bathroom." I feel the couch shake and open my eyes all the way and see him laughing. I looked around but didn't see anything funny, then went back to staring at him. When he finally noticed me, he sobered and cupped my face. "Believe me, Opal, I do not need the bathroom." I widen my eyes and see him nod once. "You heard me." I sure did. He kissed my lips and pulled back, looking worried again. "You can't hear me though." I'm not sure why. That's Spidey, my fated mate. Lights flashed around me and my room spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. My heart dropped into my stomach as I slumped. Disappointed in myself. "I told you I can't." "It's fine. At least I can hear you." I shake my head. But I can't hear you, and it won't work if only one of us is able to speak to the other. He takes my hands and kisses my knuckles. We'll keep trying. Don't give up yet. Okay. I nod as I see a shadow behind Lycon. Kaelin and Nadine standing in the dining room, watching us curiously. Nadine smiled at me as Kaelin crossed his arms. I say to my mate, I won't. Good. He said and kissed me once more. Who's ready to go? Kaelin said when we pulled apart. Lycon pulled me up to stand and wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me towards the other two. Nadine gestured for us to follow her. When we got outside, there was a vehicle waiting for us. Lycon opened the passenger door for me and helped me inside before closing the door and walking to the driver's side and getting in beside me. Grabbing the steering wheel, he started to drive. Kaelin tapped my shoulder and I looked back at him. Are you ready to have fun? I smiled. I'm ready. Nadine grinned and said, Alpha should get a kick out of this. I see Lycon shake his head out the corner of my eye and smile. I guess we'll see. Turning to face the front again, I see we're in a human town with a bunch of small buildings. I notice people walking about on the sidewalks and children playing about without a care in the world. Lycon parked the car in front of a building that had such loud music that I could feel the vibrations, and a bunch of people walking in and out. When the stench of unspeakable things came to my nose, I tried not to gag. I didn't want the others to think I didn't want to go in, because I did. Lycon got out and rounded the car to open my door. When I looked up at him, he smiled and said, This isn't the worst I've seen. I got out and waited for the other two. Then Lycon lead us in, holding my hand. The music was overwhelming combined with the stench and heat from so many bodies. I held tight to my mate, afraid of getting lost in such a confined space. Behind me, Kaelin and Nadine followed, staying close, but seeming excited all the same. Bodies of different sizes and shapes pushed against me, and if it weren't for Kaelin pushing them back, I would have been crushed between them all. We finally found the bar and Lycon sat on a stool, pulling me down to sit on his lap. Kaelin and Nadine sat beside us, ordering drinks. It was a good thing I was deaf, or else I wouldn't be able to stand this place. Lycon bent, turned my head to look at him and asked, What would you like to drink? I shrugged. He looked behind me and said, Nothing too strong. I turned and saw Nadine ordering something. Then the bartender nodded and got to work. It took a few minutes until he had different liquids mixed and shook together, then put it in a glass, sliding it towards me. It was a pearl pink color with an umbrella sticking out of it. I sniffed it and scrunched my nose. Lycon's body shook with laughter as I moved the drink away from me. I'm not having that. My mate kissed my cheek and I turned to him with a disgusted look. He smiled and said, It tastes better than it smells. Trust me. I shook my head. That smells too sweet for my liking. I'm not drinking it. One sip. He pleaded. If you still don't like it, we'll get you something else. I glanced at the drink, then at him again. Sighing, I took the drink and put it to my lips, taking a small sip. It was fruity with a harsh heat at the back of my throat that traveled down to my stomach. I coughed and almost spit it back out, but shook it off. Someone took the glass and put something else down in front of me. I took a sniff and the scent of fresh water made me lunge for it. I drank the whole cup, not stopping for air. When I finished, I glared at Lycon for making me try the stupid drink. What the hell was that? He shrugs and pointed to Nadine and Kaelin, who were grinning at me. I deepened my stare. I hate that shit. It was horrible. Kaelin almost fell off his stool from laughing so hard while Nadine said, It's alcohol. It's meant to burn and be horrible. Pushing Lycon's hands away from my waist, I stood and turned towards the dance floor. It was crowded and cramped, but I made my way over. When I got there, I turned to see my mate had followed me, staying close. I was grateful, and my arms found their way around his neck until he was wrapped around me so I was safe. We swayed gently even though I could tell the song was fast, but neither of us cared. His arms were about my waist and his head resting on mine, while I kept my head on his chest and my body close to his. His scent would smoke and snow filled my nose, taking everything else and putting it into the background. He didn't let me go and didn't say anything. I was content. It was a while before I straightened and looked around. The floor was less crowded now and the night outside completely dark. Kaylin was dancing with a few girls not far away while Nadine danced alone, a sad smile on her face. Lycon jerked as if startled, and I pulled back far enough to see what the problem was. His head was looking in the direction of the doors where 3 men entered and were staring towards us. My mate's grip tightened around me, almost as if he was afraid I'd disappear. The men turned their attention to Nadine, who barely noticed the commotion thanks to the music and stench of the place. When she did look up, it was to stare back at the group. Her lips formed the word mate as her hands started trembling. The man in front of the other two took a step towards us, but Lycon stepped in front of Nadine, with me behind his back now. Nadine ran up to Lycon and started talking too fast for me to understand while my mate glared at the others. Other people sensed there was trouble and backed away, unsure of what might happen next. I saw Nadine's mate start to talk. Let the woman make her choice. Alpha, if she wants to be with me, then let her. Kaylin noticed what was going on and came over, watching between our friends with some confusion before glancing at the men with a spark of understanding. I stared at the men as well and saw Nadine's mate staring in awe and lust. Lust, no love. My eyes glared at him before I turned to Lycon and trying to get his attention, but ignored me. I shook his arm, then tried Nadine, who tried to see what I wanted, but Lycon didn't let her. Use the link, my wolf suggested. I sighed and closed my eyes. Lycon, listen to me. I felt them stop and heavy breathing. When I opened my eyes, Lycon was staring at me with confusion. I looked at Nadine. Please don't go with him. Nadine, he won't be good to you. But he's my mate. Opaline. I nodded and gestured to the man. Don't look using your eyes. Look using your head. He doesn't love you. He wants nothing other than pain for you. You can reject him. She shook her head. I can't. Of course. You can. Because you're a strong she-wolf who can take care of herself. I say with encouragement, taking her hands that were shaking violently. I whisper, his friends don't look very nice either. Nadine glanced at the men and shuddered. When she looked at me again, she nodded and embraced me. I saw the man narrow his eyes at me before saying something to one of his comrades. From this far, I couldn't tell what they were saying, but from the grins to gave, it couldn't be good. Lycon, get Nadine out of here. He's going to try to fight for her. Lycon looked at me with surprise, then shook his head. I think he said something like, I'm not leaving you. But it was hard with all the panic that has set in. Before I could change my mind, I pushed Nadine into Lycon and pushed him away. I turned to Kaylin, who was watching me with curious eyes before grinning and preparing to fight. I needed to shift. I'm stronger with my wolf. The man bowed his head at me, saying something I could not see. I looked at Kaylin, who interpreted, a very warm welcome to the new Luna of the Blue Oasis back. I roll my eyes. Why don't we take this outside? I say and walk towards him in the doors. He holds the door open and lets Kaylin and I out before following. When I turn back around, the man is smirking at us while leaning against the building. He said, You're tiny for a wolf. You're large for a man. I counter. He laughs and straightens. I just want my mate. I won't bother this pack again if I can just have my mate. I shake my head slowly. I'm not going to let her get hurt by you. She's not going with you. I'm only going to ask one more time before I lose my patience. He said, and I could tell his patience wasn't far from being lost. She is a part of my pack, and I will protect those in my pack. I will not allow a road to hurt anyone I care for. I feel Kaylin stiffen beside me while the man takes out a knife and his men start to come forward. He said, You should have let her go. I might not have had to hurt you then. I know, as well as everyone else including you, that you will lose this fight. I shrugged and stepped forward and shrugged. Guess I'll have to fight my best. Won't I? He grinned and lunged at me, but I rolled out of the way, shifting into my wolf. She growled at Nadine's mate, baring her teeth and raising her hackles. The man also shifted and came at her, knocking her onto her back underneath him. She heard Kaylin shout my name but didn't dare glance over at him and sliced her claws on the rogue's belly, drawing blood. He growled in pain and started snapping his teeth at my neck. My wolf went for his neck with her claws but managed to get his shoulder, all the way down to his bone. In response, his teeth found my paw and bit down. Hard. I howled in pain and kicked at him to get off. His amber eyes watched me struggle for a moment before he let go and stepped back, seeming to think I would give up. I glanced to where KLM was and saw he'd already killed one of the lesser rogues and was with the other. Nadine's mate was watching KLM with some interest, but soon started walking away. How for mate? I whined to my wolf. She did. Within moments, another howl could be heard, this one strong and enraged. KLM and the rogue stopped fighting for a moment. Listening, KLM immediately glanced to me and I saw something in his eyes spark. I watched as he turned to the distracted rogue and clenched his throat hard with his teeth, then ripping it out viciously. KLM kicked the wolf off him, spit out blood and guts, then ran over to me. Shifting, he was naked and hovering over my body, tears in his eyes. Why the hell did you fight him? Max Brady, my fated mate. White squashed around me and my wounds spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. I whined, my paw bleeding and my pride wounded. I bowed my head and looked away to where Nadine's mate was heading. KLM held me tight, still naked and angry, carrying me back into the bar. He grabbed a tablecloth that was clean enough and wrapped it around me, then putting me on the same table. He took my leg and carefully looked at my paw. People started to gather around and whisper until one woman came forward. Let me help, please. He looked at her then glanced around the room. No, I need her owner. Please. She'll bleed to death. The woman pleaded. KLM looked at me and I just sighed, showing to do whatever he thought best. Finally, he said, fine. Help her and be fast. The woman smiled, then went to a nearby table where she grabbed a bag and hurried back. I need you to hold her muzzle so she doesn't hurt anyone. KLM nodded, then came around and stood above my head, then gently grabbed my muzzle firmly in his hands. Another man wrapped a blanket around KLM's shoulders as the woman set her station up on a chair. This is going to be painful for her, so try and hold her still. The woman had a bottle open and hovering it over my paw, ready to pour it on. Just as she tips it, the doors to the bar crash open and startles everyone including me. Lycon and Nadine were there, the former seeing my injury and growled low in his throat. Thank you so much for joining me in this obsession with werewolves. I hope you've had a great time and can't wait to come back for more. Remember to subscribe, leave your comments, and share this passion with others. Until next time, keep being obsessed.